Welcome to Musical Orbit. We're here today at the Punch Bowl in Mayfair with the fantastic electric string quartet StringFever. Giles and Ralph Broadbent are violinists, their brother Neil plays the cello and their cousin Graham plays the viola. You grew up in remarkably musical surroundings. How much were you guided by your parents in your musical education? How much of it was already in you and you would have done it anyway without their help?
Well, I think we were fortunate, if that's the right word, to be surrounded by music when we were growing up, all four of us, in particular classical music, in particular string playing. So three of the previous generation in our family decided to make string playing their profession. And so quite literally we're surrounded by string playing, and I think one of the benefits of that from our point of view is we had that wealth of experience to draw from when we got perhaps a bit older and we decided we wanted to make music our career. I mean, when we're very young, it was, I want to get involved with that because that looks a lot of fun, and you see it from that perspective, as starting to learn the instrument. But I think it really had its benefits when we got a little bit older and we all decided we wanted to become professional performers. And just to have that wealth of knowledge, it never really felt like it was being forced on you by the uncles or dads at the time, but you kind of knew that you had good advice if you just wanted to know what the music business was like, because I think it's very difficult to get that unless you actually speak to people that have been through that experience of doing it. They don't really teach you that at music college, sadly. They teach you how to play scales, or they try to teach you how to play scales, but what you might call the real world of a performing musician is something that you really only get from speaking to other people. We were lucky that we had that on hand, particularly our uncle Nigel, who's in the London Symphony Orchestra. So he was, we used to go and follow him for work experience, for example. Some people would go into an office for a week, and we thought, we want to be musicians. Certainly, I don't know about Graham, but certainly Giles and I went and shadowed him, if you like, for a week. So watched all the rehearsals, the recording sessions. Not only watched it, but then we were able to speak to both him and all his colleagues. So we had that access, if you like, at quite a young age to professional performing musicians. So,
even younger than that, from a very early age, or perhaps even before you were born, I don't know, your dad was running music courses from your family home in West Wales, which I came on as a child, had a great time, it was absolutely brilliant. So you must have loved the social aspect of it.
When I was, they started the courses when I was 2 years old and Ralph was 0, so about 6 weeks old I think when my dad ran his first music course. But it started out, it was his pupils from rugby school and his private pupils in the town of Rugby, brought them over to play chamber music and string orchestra music, and also as well to give them the chance to sort of mix socially, play a bit of sports, go to the beach, all those kind of things. So as well as being a music camp environment, it was about teaching kids or giving kids the chance to socialise and see the social side of music. I think what a lot of people who aren't musicians don't realise is it's a way of life being a musician. It's not just get your music instrument out of the box and then put it back in its box. It's all about the camaraderie. That's in a way how the best orchestras and the best ensembles are groups that actually get on socially. Sadly, not every orchestra gets on quite that way, but I think as musicians we can tell really class music performance usually comes from a group of musicians that get on well together. Yeah. I think my dad was trying to encourage kids to have that opportunity to mix and play music together, but also socialise together.
And so now, how does it work with the four of you working together?
Well, it certainly sort of transcends down to myself. I'm quite a bit younger than these old guys, as you can probably tell. But and my younger sister, who's also a musician. And I remember growing up, when we were growing up at that stage, my dad had, with the help of my mum, had run so many of these music courses by then. Not only had I seen that, but I'd seen the social aspect from looking up to my older brothers. Of course, I wanted to play with them. I grew up listening to their CDs that they recorded in their little busking groups and stuff, and I always listened to it every day, and I wanted to be a part of that. So to be able to join in was fantastic, but to see the social aspect of it was really inspiring.
I think when you're doing that, when you're playing in the street, you learn how to be a bit different, because if you're from the very sort of what you might call the old school classical way of performing, I think a lot of people aren't going to relate to that, and they're not going to give you any money. So we found ways of opening it up to literally the man in the street, and I think that is really kind of unspoken thing that we've all tried to do with the group, is try so the man in the street can relate to it. About 2003, 2004, about that, Neil there was he was on a gap year, as it's called, before going to college. and it turned out to be we kidnapped him basically.
Gap lifetime.
Gap
Never made
decade,
it.
yeah.
So suddenly we had the lineup. We'd done some busking before. We'd already owned some electric violins, and we'd been playing around with it more as a kind of hobby than a profession. So it kind of, that was a catalyst, and then we met someone that said, "Can you put together a show?" So that gave us a focus to do that. Well, I think Giles is really generally he's certainly the driving force behind the group, and therefore takes on a lot of responsibility. It's funny, in the early years, I think our kind of roles, if you want to use that, within the more practical side, weren't clearly defined. And we met some of our German friends. Giles and I used to work in Germany, and they were very, well, surely you must divide the jobs up equally, and this is very normal. But we didn't quite have that organisational naturally, but I think over the years it kind of has settled down into people having roles. Graham is very, very good practically at building stuff, and with all the electronic kit that we have to carry around with us flying everywhere, there's a certain amount of cables and practical things that need kind of modifying, if you like. You can't just buy these things off the shelf. So that's one thing that Graham's very good at, and when we get a new van, he kits it all out with the things that's needed within the van, the tour bus. So that's one of his offstage skills, if you like. Giles is quite into all the tech side of it, so he'll be looking at what's the next best sort of amplifier effects unit we can do. I tend to do most of the musical arranging, so I'm the one charged with, if someone says, "Can you put together a medley of such and such?" That's kind of one of my roles.
Neil looks beautiful.
Neil's the off stage. He just
Banter. I drive people around. I drive them around.
yeah.
But also you're the beatboxer, you're the rhythm section as well.
That's right, yes indeed. I use this microphone here to do a bit of vocal percussion. I tend to use this electric cello here, as well as bowing it for a lot of our pieces. I tend to use the lower strings, C and the F. This is a 5-string cello, so it's got a lower string on there. I use it and I pitch it very much like a bass player would. But I can do both at the same time. Like that.
So this is what it sounds like as an electric guitar. Here we have a bit of a Hammond organ sound. We got a wah-wah sound. So I've had great fun over the last few years trying to work out how to make these sounds from an electric violin. The hardest thing was actually to make an electric violin sound like a regular violin. It's very, very easy to make an electric violin sound like nothing on earth and quite horrible. If you speak to any sound engineers, I think you'll find they dread having electric violins on a gig. And we met one sound engineer recently, and he showed me all the EQ that he uses just on a regular electric violin. We came in, plugged ours in, and he couldn't quite work out how we got it sounding so nice. And it's probably about 5 or 10 years fiddling around with our guitar effects processor, just tweaking it to get it sound like a real violin.
So do you play it differently from a normal acoustic violin then, the actual bow pressure?
The technique used to play an electric violin is pretty much the same as a regular violin. Maybe don't press quite as hard. I quite like to dig into an acoustic violin and make a good old hacky sound. That's my style, the gypsy style. On an electric violin, if you press too hard, you do get a sort of crunchy sound, but basically it's the same technique.